Yay, it says that we're live. Welcome, Nicole, to our live version of the Connected Yoga Teacher podcast. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
I am excited because our Connected Yoga teachers will get to hear your story of what it's been like for you as a studio owner, especially when you were facing possibly closing your studio this year due to COVID and the strains of COVID, but you didn't. And so I want to dig into that. But before we get there, I want to know where did your yoga journey begin? When was that? Was there a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, yoga has changed how things are in my life, and I want to share this with other people?
Yeah, so I first started practicing when I really once I graduated from university, and even before then I kind of dabbled in it, and it was that was the first aha, I think, because since I was a little girl, from the best of our knowledge, I was born with a condition in my spine, so I was always kind of put in this bubble to be safe, and never really encouraged into sports. And I'm not an athlete by any way, but I always felt like I couldn't do sports or things because it was too dangerous. So when I found yoga, it was like my naturally flexible body enjoyed it. And I felt like, oh, this is something I can do and be active. So I practiced that way for years, and then I moved to Houston, Texas, for my job at the time. And I was just at a crossroads with my career, with moving to a new country. My husband and I were getting married. He was like, he was chasing me to the country while we weren't married. It was like all of this, life stuff happening. And I was just like, then my yoga practice became this refuge, more so for centering myself. And I quickly learned that yoga was more than a practice for my physical, naturally flexible body. So then I was like, I need a retreat. I need to go on a retreat. I need to get out of here. This is a massive city, 4 million plus people just in this city, coming from Newfoundland, St. John's, Newfoundland, but we're much smaller population. And so I went to a small ashram south of Austin, Texas, and I ended up doing a training, which many people end up doing when they're looking for a retreat, I think, when they're passionate about yoga. And it just changed my life, just to be immersed with virtually no technology in this place, where it was like I wasn't even in North America at that point. And it really shook me. Like, it really put me on this new trajectory of really being more honest about how I'm living my life, living more authentically, making choices that were feeding me in creative ways that my job wasn't doing at the time. So it just fueled me. It fueled me to ultimately quit my old job and to start pursuing yoga as a means to serve others, because I just loved it so much. And I really felt like it embraced this creative side of me that I wasn't getting otherwise. And I really like working with humans, which my old job did not provide.
That's amazing. So then where in that journey, first of all, I just want to call out as well, I see a few people are popping in here live. Can you let us know if you can see us and hear us in the comments? I didn't ask for that earlier. And so my next question is, where along the way then did you decide, well, you were in Texas, but now you're back in Newfoundland, so you must have moved back and you started a studio there. Like, where did you decide, okay, I'll teach yoga, now I'll open a studio?
Yeah, so I lived in Calgary for 2 years, Houston for 4 years, working as an engineer. And then I moved back to Newfoundland, got a transfer with the same company. And I worked here for about 1.5 years, at which there was a lot of reorganization going on in the company. And it basically gave me this window to it made it easier for me to have the nerve to say, I'm leaving. And, I had these golden handcuffs with this company, right? They were providing me, they were, if I was to work for any company at that time in the industry I was working in, I was working with the best company, in my opinion. So I was pretty fortunate in that way that they supported me, and it was very lucrative for me during that time. So I was in a position where I was established enough where I could make that big leap. You know, it wasn't a rash decision. And I basically just devoted, left in the summer, and then started just dabbling in yoga. I actually started teaching when I moved back to Newfoundland. While I was still at my old job, I started teaching one class a week in the evening at a co-op. So that's when I kind of got my, my yoga teaching jitters out, and started teaching gentle yoga to people who are mostly new to yoga. And then I opened the studio this spring after I quit my job, mostly because I was renting. My friend and I were renting from a few places, and I managed to find this place that was reasonable rent. It was like all the things were covered, the heat and the light, the snow clearing, all that jazz. And it wasn't that much more than if I was renting elsewhere. And both her and I were actually on the board at the co-op and doing the vast majority of the work there. And it wasn't in a location that worked for us, really. So we were like, why don't we just do our own thing and we'll manage it? So we started off as a rental-based studio. So we were all independent teachers. We started probably with 5 or 6. And then I got pregnant. So then what happened is I started to basically pay subs or pay people to teach my classes. And then when I was ready to come back from maternity leave, I realized that, I'm not going to go back to my 8 to 10 classes a week at all. Right. So it just kind of evolved into more of that contractor studio model. I still have renters, and I was lucky and fortunate enough during my maternity leave to have a renter who basically paid my rent through my maternity leave. So it was really fortunate to have that. So I do still encourage renters at the studio as well, and I keep my contractor community pretty small because I really don't want to manage any more than 6 teachers.
Right. Okay. This is so good.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks to Jenny and someone else for saying that you can hear us. So you and I connected this year. First of all, when COVID hit, you pivoted, you got your studio online, you did all the things. I think that's before you and I had connected.
Yeah.
And then you reached out to me when you were faced with this, oh my gosh, am I going to have to close the studio? So paint the picture of where that started, what that felt like the day where you were like, oh my gosh, is this going to be able to still run? Because just for our listeners, your studio up to that point was a profitable business. It was making profit. It was doing really well. It was when COVID hit that things really changed.
Yeah, so this year we would have been entering into our 5th year as a business. And I will admit the first, 3 years I was getting used to it. I was financially secure, so I didn't really need to go into withdraw any extra loans or anything for it. So, and we were in, a profitable place, which was great. And then this year, it was like, oh yeah, we finally got our groove. We have our momentum. We were getting each one of my teachers, I felt like they were developing their own niche, they were developing their own community as well. The students kind of to dabble sometimes in other teachers' classes, and it was a really good energy. I felt so good. And I was at the situation where my manager, Megan, and my friend, she was taking over a lot of the studio responsibility, and I was starting to get into my groove of working more on my independent projects and yoga teaching. So when COVID hit, it was it was, at first I was I remember, so we have energy exchangers. I call them the mom and dad of the studio because they are basically the mom and dad of our studio. And she's like, Nicole, when do you think we'll be back and open again? She says, do you think we'll be open by May? And I'm like, no, Jacqueline, it's going to be the end of June. It'll be the end of June. So when I first contacted you, I wasn't even really thinking that. I wasn't initially in that like, oh, I have to close mindset. It was more like I was started to reevaluate. I was at the point where I was reevaluating my expenses and doing research on like, am I overpaying I thought I was at the point where I was kind of overpaying my teachers. And then I was like at this point in the road where I kind of liked paying my teachers that much, but I still needed to be profitable. So I was kind of wanted to work through with that with you. And then you kind of put the seed in my head about like what happened if you had to close. And that's when I had my little like meltdown. I don't know if you remember.
I do. I do.
Yeah. And
Well,
it was just struck me like, it was like, like I could feel it in my heart, like, oh my gosh, this space could go. And it was like, oh, I think I knew it, but it wasn't until you actually made me like try and visualize what it would be like if I didn't have the studio, did I realize how much I didn't want to lose the space.
right. And
Yeah.
that's a great exercise for yoga teachers, because if someone says to you, what would it be like if you had to close your studio? And there's this initial like, that would be such a relief, then that's something to look at as well. But yours was like, oh my gosh, we've built this. Like, and I wouldn't say it was a light bulb reaction that you had. It was over time that you were talking about what it would be like if the studio
Yeah.
had to close. A couple of things from that. I remember you actually coming to a realization that that was a possibility. Uh,
Yeah.
and
So,
maybe like, was there some part of acceptance there, or that was
yeah.
an option? What did that feel like?
So first it was like, when you first said it, it was more like, no, no way. It's not happening. I'm not losing my studio. But it was a lot of grief because I was like, yeah, this could happen. Like it was, and then so between that session and I think we booked a session within, I think it was about 2 months or so. And then I was chatting with you a bit in between. There was I got comfortable with it. So I just kept thinking about it, like, even like sitting in meditation, like that's what I kind of do sometimes. If there's something that's kind of like, stewing inside me, just like really visualizing that happening and then seeing how I feel and just let myself feel it. And that's how I process things, in denial for a bit, for a few days or a week. And then acceptance, slowly came in. So I kind of could work from a place with a little bit less attachment. There was still this attachment, but I kind of started to like accept the fact that, yes, this is a possibility, that I could have to close. And I was in a fortunate situation where my landlord was letting me go month to month. So I had a lot of flexibility, and I could just like wipe my hands of it if I wanted to. So there wasn't that feeling of responsibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you did is you dug into your numbers. So I had asked
Yeah.
you, can you outline some of those numbers that made the big difference for you, or made the picture clear of like what had to happen next?
So even before all this happened, so, for the first few years, my studio was more of a creative project, and I didn't really look at the numbers much. It was more like, and I think for me, in my personal situation, it worked because at that point in my life, I needed a creative outlet, and it was a hobby, and I knew it was, and I didn't need to make money. And that was a decision I made because I needed it more for therapeutic reasons.
Right.
So it worked. But then after I had my daughter, I was like, okay, I want to start contributing to the household again. I want to be able to, see if this studio thing is actually something that makes sense for the amount of effort I'm putting into it, considering my time now is extra precious because every moment I take away from I'm spending on my business, I'm not with my child. And I knew that I wanted to work more of a part-time basis, like, 15, 20 hours a week was like, that's good for me. So I wanted to see if I can make it work. And my husband is, he's a real numbers guy. And he's like, Nicole, you need to look at your numbers. You need to make sure that, because I would just like roll up my income and not really break myself out as paying myself as a teacher.
Right.
So that was the first thing I did, is that I looked at our cash flow And yes, we were profitable, but was the studio profitable? And it was the margins of what the studio was making were actually very small. Basically, I was kind of bankrolling the studio. So what I was reinvesting was mostly coming from my teaching income, which is, I think, is okay for a little bit, you know, but then I had to really realize, how many students do I need to be able to pay myself and break even in the
Right.
studio? So basically, my accounting, the way it looked was, or the finances was, this is how much we pay teachers, including me. And this is the average dollar amount I'm paying teachers for weekly yoga classes. And this is the studio, how much a student gets paid per appointment. And then what is my expenses? So I talked to you about that too, but really getting clear on those minimum expenses, like getting clear of those things that are like, you know, a little bit more frivolous, which are nice, but you know, in survival mode, they're not needed. And then I came up with that number and basically came up with this number of like, I need 124 students to break even at the studio.
Right.
So it sounds simple, but it was a lot of work, especially not a whole lot. It was more because my finances, I had to really start from the beginning. And I loved crunching numbers. But it's, sometimes you don't want to do it because you're afraid what you're going to find out.
That is so, I love that you said that. You sent me some like really organized spreadsheets.
Yeah.
It was so clear to see. And then you came up with this 124 number. And I want to hit on this because now that we've reached where we are now, tell our listeners what happened with this 124 number.
Yeah. So just so we're clear, like the way we run our studio is not a drop-in model. So we do seasonal registrations. So each season we take full registration and we call it like a membership. So we have a fall membership. We do have some drop-in options for new students, and we do have passes available, but they're not as attractive to students. Vast majority, like 98% of people choose to do a membership. So I usually do a launch prior to each session. And I knew I needed that 124. Well, sorry, I digressed a bit. What was your question again?
What happened with the 124?
Oh, yeah,
but I'm
sorry.
glad you outlined this, that
Yeah.
you have a membership model. And just to clarify, when does that session begin and end for the fall? What are the dates for the fall session?
It started last Wednesday, September 9th. And it ends December 21st. So because it actually ends like, that's a Monday because of the long weekend. So most of the classes actually end the week before. So during the holidays, we usually take 2 to 3 weeks off in between there.
Right.
So, some studios stay open, but I really feel like, for me, I don't want to work over Christmas. So, and I'm creating my own business. So this is it.
You create it the way you want it. I love that. I just want to highlight that your session is quite long.
Yes, it's 14 weeks.
Some people say like, okay, I'll run a 6 or an 8 week session, but this means that you have way less marketing time. Like you have that launch time and you had to get 124 people, which is nothing to sneeze at. And then, so you set this 124 goal, and then tell us what happened with that.
So yes, 124 registrations for 14 weeks of commitment, right? And we set it to have these registrations for classes starting on September 9th. And literally the night before, we got a couple more registrations come in, and the total was 124 the night before. It was I couldn't get over it. I was like talking to Megan and I was like, Megan, did we just like hit like exactly 124? She's like, yes. And she was like super pumped. She's just as invested as I am in this. So yeah, it was goosebumps all over. And now we're over 130 at this point. So.
Right. So you surpassed that. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Now, before that, like a few weeks before that, or a couple weeks before that, I remember our conversations then were like, you knew that if you didn't hit that number, you had set this in your mind. Look, I'm not going to lose money on this studio. I will have to close it. Like
Yes. Yeah.
you had the plan in your mind. Okay, I'll have to let people know. They won't lose their money. I'll refund their money. All of these plans in place. But leading up to that, I'd love for you to share with our yoga teachers what worked the best for marketing. How did you get the most registrations?
So working with you, I started doing the first real communication was in an email, and it was a video in an email. So it was a MailChimp email, and I just had a thumbnail there. And in that email, there was I think it was an 8 or 9 minute video of me basically saying, being real with them, the fact that we're struggling, that they are the reason we're here is because of them, right? And in order for us to continue to thrive, that we needed them to come back. So these emails, what I did was to directly email the previous members of 2020. So I knew these were like my super warm, like they were like the ones who were going to join up more than likely. And as with many places, the summer is pretty low in terms of registration compared to other times of the year, especially in Newfoundland where our season is typically pretty short, but it was lower than like previous years, right? So I went back. Usually I just like give early bird. What I do is we do early bird rates just for the previous session people as a way of saying thank you for continuing with us. But I actually extended that for the whole of 2020 and addressed it that way, so that trying to get a little bit more people in. So we had the early bird. I can't remember the early bird date. I think it was like the August 24th was the early bird. So at that point, we still didn't have our minimum number, but we were getting closer. So, in those initial conversations with the members, I wasn't like, we need 124 people. It was like, it was softer and kinder because I didn't want to scare them. I didn't want to, and like, we have so much stuff. Everyone has so much stuff going on right now. I didn't want to add extra turmoil in their lives about like, oh my gosh, my yoga classes may not be there in the fall, right? Yeah. And then at the same time, I also emailed my newsletter people, which is about I don't know if it was like 700 or 800 people outside of the membership, and then even like cushied it a little bit more. So it wasn't like, as like, please register, like we're going to close. It was softer. And then with your really a lot of encouragement from you, I kept emailing them, which really was like hard for me because I really only emailed them once a month before the whole newsletter. And another thing that I did that you recommended is like, I used to email the members through our Gmail account, like our regular account, and I put everything into MailChimp. So then I could see, oh, well, these people really open our emails a lot compared to the newsletter. And tracking them and stuff, it was like so much easier. So that was like one of the biggest like learnings from communicating with them. So then I just kept emailing them. I remember like talking with you. I was like, Shannon, I have to send another email. And you're like, you can do it. And I'm like, okay. But I just kept trying to keep it simple because I always felt like I had to nurture them first and then offer them. But like you said, I'm always nurturing them in every email. So she said, as you said, let's keep that. This is your time to sell, to focus on selling. You could still share a little tidbit of what's going on, a little bit of advice or tips, but focus on registrations. And then I literally just got more honest with them and said, we need these numbers. And that was delivered to, I actually wrote that, like, I think it was at the time, like 27 or something more registrations to stay open. I sent that to the people who were already registered. So it wasn't sent to like completely, like, people who are on my newsletter that were like, oh my gosh, like, I have never been here. Now she's like saying that they might close. I didn't do it to them. I just sent it to people who are already part of our community, who were invested in the studio. And when I sent that email that saying, if we don't get these X number of registrations, I think it was like 20 something, like, the messages we got back was like, I could cry now just like thinking of them. I had a couple of students, they do chair and gentle yoga with me, and they've been with us for years. And they're like, they already come twice a week. And they're like, if we buy another membership, will you stay open? I was just like, oh my gosh, my heart is breaking. But they sent it to their friends. We had students, some more students sign up for our yoga fundamentals course, which is, that's a minimum commitment of 4 weeks. So that's a good way for people who are new to the studio to start out without having to commit to the membership. We had people share things on Facebook. I also sent them what did you call it? The
swipe copy.
Did a swipe copy. So that's just basically a little text that they could post on social media. They did that. That was in that email. Like, we need this many students. Share this, please, with your students, with your friends on Facebook and email. And they were like, how do I do this, Nicole? Like, some people were like, I don't know how to do it. So I was like helping them. And then people were like, oh, I can't, if you close, I don't know what I'll do. So it was like, it almost like even put more fire within me to do the work, to even do what else can I do? They're doing this, so what else can I do? Right. So I kept emailing.
Yeah, so email was the big one, and I want to come back to that. So you were emailing once a month, which a lot of our yoga teachers do. And did it increase to once or twice a week?
Oh, we were doing, we were doing it, I think over the month of August, we emailed it, we did 1, 2, 3. So over a period of, so I think, say, starting a week on a Monday, I emailed them that week. The following week, I emailed them twice more. And then the Monday or the day before the start of the session, I emailed them again. Right. So there was, over a period of 2.5 weeks, I sent 4 emails, which was like very uncomfortable for me.
And I remember you saying, like, people aren't going to want to do this. People aren't going to want this many emails. But I said to you, this is like, you're basically telling them, and you're inviting them. And you could see, like, this is the thing that yoga teachers forget, I think, or all business owners. When you send an email, generally you see sales if there's a call to action that relates to sales. More so than social media, more so than other places. Now, you did post a little bit to social, and you asked them to. Jenny's asking, what was that called again? It's called swipe copy. So it's basically you just provide some words that someone could use. Like, Nicole supplied some of the studio information and wrote it out like it was a student saying, hey, I go to this studio. It's a great place. If you're interested, here's how you can check it out, kind of thing. And for our super fans, it's great if we can give them those words to use.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
What did it feel like then? Let's go back to the email thing. So what was your resistance to sending that many emails? What did you think was going to happen? Like, what would have been the worst thing kind of going through your mind?
I just felt like I was badgering them. Like, I was bombarding their inbox. I knew I was going to get more unsubscribes, and like, I'm kind of at a point where unsubscribes don't really bother me so much, because I keep telling myself, like, oh, these are not students who weren't going to sign up with me anyway, right? Like, for example, I had some moms who did like mom and baby yoga with me like 2 years ago, and like, they have never committed with anything else. And I have a couple of those unsubscribed. So like, maybe they'll come back to me again if they get pregnant or have another baby. But like, you know, it's just like, I knew, and then like the last email I sent, I actually got the most unsubscribes, but then I got like, you know, my number of 124 that same day, right? So, right. Yeah, I was pretty, so, yeah, it's more of like, I don't want to overwhelm people's inboxes and be like, oh, and then being like, oh my gosh, she's emailing me again. Like, that's basically it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to highlight that because we all feel that way. And, I sent an email out this morning that was telling people that they could come and attend this live and also talked about the podcast. And my email goes out once a week. And um, I remember what it was like to switch from emailing just once in a while to once a week. And now I could easily send out two emails a week if I needed to. And I'm much more comfortable with the unsubscribes as well. I wonder if anyone here attending live has questions for Nicole about what else she did or how she runs things at her studio. One other thing I want to ask you about is how you've set things up, because you're in Newfoundland, you can have in-person classes now and online at the same time. Do you want to tell us your setup of moving things to make a little more space in the studio?
Yeah. So we did, so we were able to have in-person classes. So for me, with the physical distancing, I could have 6 people in studio, and plus the teacher, so 7 people in total. So at the beginning, it wasn't such a big deal in terms of like, having the technology on the floor and stuff, because there was only a couple people really coming to class. They weren't really comfortable. And then I had like, cords strung around on the floor, and I was like taping them down. And then like the laptop was like, so the way I do mine is I have a webcam on the laptop. So the laptop was like away from me, so I couldn't really see the students who were online. So I was teaching online and in studio at the same time, because, in order for us to make the class viable, that's what we had to do. The students at that point were already very comfortable with online at that point. So it was, we were comfortable with the online part as well. So adding the students in studio was, we were ready for that. And that worked pretty good. It was just like all these cords everywhere. I want the laptop close to me. I want to see the students. And I need to get this camera off the floor, because that 6th space wasn't really usable. It was kind of like they had to navigate around like the cords and like the camera, and it was just weird. So what I did is you can buy a USB extension cord, and for that goes space, it's like an extension cord you would have for your regular outlets, right? But it's for USB. You have to make sure you get a USB 3.0 though, because a 2.0 won't do. Lesson learned. It's just not enough power for, I don't know the proper words, but not enough juice in it for live streaming. So I learned that. I got a 30-foot extension cord. My husband is super handy. So he mounted it to the ceiling. So he basically, on Amazon, I bought a little ceiling mount for a webcam, and attached that to the ceiling, and then the extension cord runs up and then behind me, and then so there's no cords on the floor. So it's just, and then it comes back down, and we haven't had any issues with streaming at all. I will say when we use the other like USB extension cord, the 2.0, it was a bit choppy and it would drop off. Just that was a lesson learned. So
that's amazing. Yeah. I also want to let people know, like, you're still doing both in-person and online classes. So if people are like, okay, I want to go and check this out and see how it looks, then they can go to NicoleBlackwood.com. That's where they up for classes still. And then so people can still sign up for sessions even though this session is running. When are you looking at marketing again, knowing that your sessions start again in the new year, right?
Yes. So our incentive is right now, how we do it is, like I said before, so we'll promote an early bird rate for our current members. So that will give us the chunk of our registration. Usually our current membership, once we get that chunk from the previous session, that solidifies us to break even or more for the next session. Right. So for the new year, we usually start like, that week after the holidays for the new year. But we asked for I'll ask for the registration for the winter for the early bird rates by like the beginning of December. So before Christmas.
Okay.
Yeah. So and even a little bit before like early December, even maybe into end of November, I have to relook at it before they really get into their Christmas mode, because they forget when Christmas starts happening, they have to get like gifts and stuff. And then there's more expenses at that point. Things, I find kind of go to the wayside when they don't have that commitment already done. And I usually at the same time promote gift certificates. So that's around the end of November. I think I'll try and get their commitment. Usually it's about 6 weeks prior to the beginning of the session. But since the holidays, there's already a 3 week, probably a 2 week break. I add that in. So it will be like the end of November. And to get the chunk of that. And I will still market. I will still market to my newsletter and online and on social media. But the focus will be like getting in the members, because we know that in the new year, we'll start getting a little bit more traction with the brand new people.
Right. So then is there anything that you're thinking in terms of your email now? And with that, like, is there anything that you would do differently or that you're looking at for the next session based on what we've gone through, and knowing that we're still in this midst of COVID? Like, we still, things could get shut down again in Canada, or things could change. Like, is there anything that you're planning going forward?
Yeah, planning at this time. So for the studio, I'm planning on to try and email them more frequently. I'm still not at the point of being able to commit to a weekly email, just because I have so many other commitments. I'm still wanting to focus a little bit more time on some niche offerings that I want to do. So I've actually pressed pause a little bit on the studio marketing. Sorry for my dog.
It's okay. She's so cute.
Hi. It's okay.
You're live.
Yeah, we're live. Sorry.
It's okay.
Okay.
Anybody else who has a dog at home is loving it.
I can go get him. It's okay, buddy. There's a guy. It's our weed guy. He's decided to come. Lesson learned. I'll close the blinds next time.
It's totally fine. This is a good chance for our people who are here live. If they have questions or comments, then they can pop them in the chat and we can get to them as well. So you were just saying that you're focusing on some niche offerings that are yours. I'm excited about this.
Yes.
I want to tell our listeners that you're really focused in on, and I'll let you do the wording of it. It's because I feel like it's not yoga for fertility. What do you call it?
Yoga to support fertility.
Right. I love it.
Yeah. So that's a passion of mine. That's something, it's really close to my heart. My husband and I tried for a long time. Well, many people tried much longer, but we were trying for a long time to get pregnant with no success. So that story is actually part of my drive as well for leaving my job, because I felt like that was another thing I wanted to focus on, was not only another career, but also myself. And I wasn't able to take care of myself the way I wanted to in that current situation. So in that, the studio, I said at that time, the first few years was more of this like creative outlet for me, because I really wanted to focus on being as healthy as possible, my husband and I, and to nurture ourselves on a level where we could go through that process and not feel like we're being pulled in other directions. And I know that's not possible for everyone, but I really felt like I was in a situation that it worked for me, and I could, basically when you're going through fertility treatments, it's a full-time job. It's basically your own office administrator managing appointments, and then you have like you have medications you're taking and schedules and doctor's appointments, and then things are changing. So, I was just fortunate enough to be able to make that more of a focus at that time. So,
Well, I'm really excited that you're focusing on that so that you can help others with this.
yeah.
This is a key piece of, and when I work with yoga teachers who run studios, they obviously have their own niche. Like their studio is a business, but if they're a yoga teacher, they have their own specialty that they'd like to focus on. So I'm excited that you get to do that and that you've set your sessions up in that way to do that. So I'm
Yeah.
just
So yeah, I'm planning on doing a 6-week session the end of October. Still need to finalize the date, the actual start date. So I'm trying to block out my calendar in a way that I'm also studying. I'm also doing an online school, a holistic nutrition program, which is going to complement my fertility offerings. So my calendar is pretty full. So I'm trying to be respectful of my time and knowing that at this time more so than ever, things change. For example, like my childcare today changed, right? So
right.
my time has changed, and just being a little bit flexible with myself. So I do really, depending on, we don't know what the fall is going to bring in terms of here in Newfoundland, we're doing pretty well, but kids are back to school. There's more travel. We don't know what's going to happen. So I'm thinking in another month or so, we'll have a little bit more clarity on, where we're kind of at. And then I'll make a little bit better plan for the studio in terms of timing emails. I'm going to start trying, possibly doing like a bi-weekly email first. Keep it simple. That's one of the things I've learned. Keep it super simple, because I was putting in way too much information. And but for now, like I do have a couple of couple of emails I can send over the next month that are kind of ready to go for the studio. Basically, it was just content that was already created from a couple of my other yoga teachers. And I'm basically going to say, yoga for tired legs. This is so I'm just going to nurture them a little bit over the next month, give them that nurture content, and then focus more on the getting my fertility program up and like my free offer online. And then once I start the end of October, I start my fertility program, hopefully successfully filled. Then in November, then I can go back to that plan for the winter with whatever information I have at that time.
That's amazing. I am so glad that you shared all of this with Nicole, all of this with us, Nicole. It's been quite like this is why I wanted to share this story, is because it's been amazing to watch you do this work. And I know you've put tons of work into your studio and into your community. Your community of yoga students and teachers means so much to you. And it's just been an honor to watch you really dig in and do the not easy work of looking at your numbers, doing the marketing, sending out the emails, tracking all of that, and to just dig in and keep going. Thanks for sharing all of this today.
Yeah, no problem. And it's just, I like for people to know that, like, sometimes when you run your own business, you have to work. I had to work a weekend. It wasn't something I wanted to do in the summer, but I had to work a weekend. I had to dig in and work that weekend in order to get those emails out. And majority of the time though, like right now, I feel like, the studio can really, it's like, we're good. I can put in more effort if I want to and get more registrations, but I'm actually okay. I'm okay. If we get more registrations organically, perfect. But it's like, I'm okay with where we're at. So just understand that, sometimes it's a lot of work, but like once you do the work, then you can coast for a little bit, for a lot of it, right? So it's not all the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's key. Like that coasting spot is where I'd love to see our yoga teachers sit. So they could look at leading up to launching, maybe extending their sessions, and then having that break, like you said, that coasting break where things are, you get paid ahead and That's
Yeah.
the registered session model. It really, or that membership model, it really makes a big difference. Yeah.
Also, the same thing goes for, I'm not sure, if some of the listeners are thinking about going more online or going what they're thinking about, but like that transition to moving online and was like, woof, it was like, this is a lot. I was like, I literally on a Monday, I decided we're going online. And then I wrote all the students were online. We went on, I made a Facebook group. We went in and I took my iPhone. This is all it was. I asked my neighbor for their Wi-Fi password because I did not have Wi-Fi.
Right.
I didn't even have like any internet in the studio at the time. So we were completely like, we're so like low key there. And yeah, and we were teaching in Facebook groups and private Facebook groups for like weeks. And then we moved to Zoom because we felt like we were a bit limited in some ways. So
That's
learning
amazing.
curve.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah. And everyone's
Wow.
like, this is awesome. They love the Facebook groups. It was though it was not as consistent as Zoom, and then we had to teach them Zoom. And then I created on my website, I created basically a members area or a catalog to save all the Zoom classes. So now we have like a members area for people, and it's like, these aren't perfect recordings. I tell my teachers, like, don't worry, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just like, just because you're on camera doesn't mean like you have to make sure the lighting is absolutely perfect for this class. The students love the members area. They're
Right.
like, they have over 200 videos to look at now.
That's
So like,
amazing.
yeah. So we're not uploading all of our classes now because we don't want to have like content overwhelm in there. But what we're starting to do now is we just list some featured classes that the teachers really like, so that instead of having like yin yoga on like July 24th, it's like, specific, like yin yoga for happy hips or something, or
Right.
like work towards half moon pose in another class. So like then students can go into that specific area and be like, oh, these are some already like fundamental classes I can get started with.
So I'm going to ask you a technical question now. Where do you store your videos? So you do it on Zoom, you must download them.
Yeah, so we do it on Vimeo. I was doing it on YouTube at first, but I decided to move to Vimeo because I wanted them to be able to kind of like not be directed anywhere else outside of us.
Right.
I didn't want them to be directed to like yoga with some yoga teacher in like God knows where. I wanted them to be like stay in an body.
Okay, so you have a Vimeo account then?
Yeah, so I have a Vimeo account and I just embed it into the way we do it. And I'm not saying this is the best way, but this is how we figure out the best way. I basically make a private blog post per video.
Right.
And so that just leaves a comment area free so they can comment and ask us questions. And then I have a separate page for each class type. And there's basically links with the dates of the classes or the description of the feature class that links to it. And I have a WordPress website, so I had to download a user plugin, which allowed people to which created a form basically for them to create a registration for our website to log in. And that took a little bit of time to get through it, but it's working for our needs right now. And then basically once they log in, it redirects them to a page that is private. So it's and then that page has all the classes. They click on the class. So if they want to go to classes with me, they click on my class, and then they see all the classes that I've done. And they go to that blog post. So they can't share it with anyone else unless they're already a member and can register with us.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you for walking through the technical stuff.
Yeah.
If yoga teachers have more questions about that, you can always put them here in the chat, and we'll check back in with them. Also, if you're like, oh my gosh, I don't have a website, I just want to highlight that our sponsor for today's live show is Offering Tree. And there's a discount code there if you go to offeringtree.com/Shannon. And I know that they are working on a membership model. They're
Yeah.
working on integration with Zoom, and they're working on how to bring these classes online. So this is a company that if you're like, I don't have a website at all, or a way to schedule people in, I would definitely check this company out. I think they're doing amazing things. And if you have
Yeah.
your own WordPress site or Squarespace, stick with that and make it work the way Nicole did. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and like I wanted to do it so it was integrated inside my website, but like you can go into Vimeo. I'm not really sure of the functionality in YouTube, but you can go into Vimeo and create like a members area within there, right?
Yes.
It's not in your website, but it's a great way to start, right? So you just have to have it, you just make the privacy so it's only for those who have an account. Like you can basically set up a little members area within Vimeo.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was an option I
I love
explored.
how you were like, I don't even have Wi-Fi. I'll get someone else's Wi-Fi password and do it in a Facebook group.
Oh,
Our students are not expecting us to have like a fully
no.
customized website.
They are like our students are like, some of them aren't even, they're registered for the fall session, paying the studio rate, and they're not even attending live classes. They're just doing it purely for the membership area.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's really
Mhm.
interesting to know.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. And
Thank
I
you.
hope things go smoother with childcare and
Oh
all of
yeah. It's okay. You just roll with it. As a parent, I think when you're a new parent, like everything's a big deal at first, and then all of a sudden you're just like, everything's a big deal. So why not just like make it not a big deal?
2020 has been a big
I
deal.
know. It is a big deal year.
It's so great to hear your story. Thank you, everyone who's here live with us today or watching the replay. And let's stay connected. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.